Hello everyone, George DeSantis here with a look at the market for the week ending June 16th, 2017. Let's take a look at the disclaimer first. Trading and investing has large potential rewards and large potential risks. This video presentation is designed for educational purposes only and is not a solicitation or advice to buy or sell any securities or other tradable instruments. So you must be aware of the risks and be willing to accept them in order to invest in the markets. Consult a licensed professional investment advisor for investment advice, since I am not one. Let's begin by taking a look at the weekly chart of the S&P 500. Let's begin by looking at a weekly chart of the S&P 500. On this chart, we can see that the trend is still up. The 4 EMA is still above the 9 EMA, and that is above the weighted moving average, the 30 weighted moving average. The parabolic is below the most recent bar. There is no indication to reverse this uptrend. And we do have a doji here. After we got this move up, we consolidated a bit. So we closed at 24.33. We're still holding above the 2400 level. And that is going to be the key support level. If we break below that, we have a lot more problems at hand. However, looking at the other indicators, Williams percent R is still above the 20% line, which says momentum is still pretty strong. The one caveat in this whole chart is the bearish divergence of MACD. I mentioned it last week. New high, MACD new high, market pulls back, MACD pulls back below the zero line, and now MACD is looking weaker here than it did here. It is weaker. So we have a bearish divergence of MACD, and we need to keep that in mind. In other words, have some caution here. RSI 12 is trending up above the 60% line. So that's telling us that the trend is still really very much up. And the Chaikin money flow indicator is still looking pretty strong. So the weekly chart is looking quite bullish. Here's a daily chart of the S&P 500. What I notice here is that we closed on the upper Bollinger Band, 2 standard deviations, some back here, and then we consolidated, pulled back a bit, and now we are closing just at about 24.33. We still have support at 2400, and as I mentioned on the weekly chart, once that holds, we should have more upside. The parabolic is now above the most recent bar, Thursday and Friday's bars. So that is an indication that this trend has some weakness to it, but it doesn't mean we ought to just turn around and sell it. The S&P closed twice between the 9 and the 30, and this is usually a buy signal. So we'll see how that plays out. As far as the Williams percent R is concerned, it's still above 20%. So it's telling us pretty good indication for momentum. Williams percent R, or rather MACD, is now below the zero line. We could see some more consolidation here. But when we look at Chaikin money flow, we see a nice uptick in Chaikin money flow on Friday. So some buyers are coming into this market on Friday, or they were anyway. Let's take a look at something else. So we do have an uptrend on the weekly and the daily charts, but we're likely to see a little more of a pullback here. We could see that. However, all in all, the trend is still up. Now here's a weekly chart from stockcharts.com, weekly chart of the S&P 500. It shows us the 3 trend lines, one above the other. It shows us that after this market trended up quite a bit, and we were having green bars, we are now on a blue bar. That doesn't say we should be selling the market. It says we could go either long or short. But I wanted to show you this impulse indicator here. And we can see at the bottom of the chart, Williams percent are still pretty strong here. So let's take a look at the daily chart on this. And on the daily chart, we can see we have blue bars. We can go either long or short. But right now, the trend is still up, as we saw earlier. So why would we want to short this market right here? Williams per centaur is still above the 20% line. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Let's take a look at something else. So let's begin to take a look at a few stocks and ETFs that we've been following. The first one is FFTY, which is the IBD 50 growth stocks, and I still own it. We can see that the high of this bar 2 weeks ago hit the 3 standard deviation line, and that's when we had that big pullback on the Friday. And then we closed between last week we closed between the 9 and the 30, and usually this is a buy signal. So we can wait to see now what happens. But let's take a look at the daily chart. On the daily chart, what we have is a symmetrical triangle. It's not really symmetrical, but that's what it's referred to in the technical analysis. Okay, so what we have is this triangle, and actually we closed outside the triangle on Friday. So right here we should be buying this with a target of the difference between this point and this point on the upside. So I'm holding FFTY. I might even add to it. We look at some of the other indicators. Williams per centaur dropped below the 50% line, but it's hanging around the 50% line. MACD certainly dropped below the 0 line, so that's not a good sign. But I'm going to go with the fact that the weekly chart still looks pretty good, and this triangle is telling us that we are likely to see a move up from here. Let's take a look at another chart. Here's a weekly chart of Berkshire. As you know, I own it. Bought at the wrong time, bought too high. And I bought actually against the seasonal chart, which I hadn't looked at, so I learned a lesson there. Always check out the seasonal chart. Right now, what we have on the weekly chart is a pullback. We had this pullback, but we also had a bullish divergence on the daily chart, so we'll take a look at that too. But as of now, the trend is now up. We can see the 4 is above the 9, the 9 above the 30. So the trend is up, and the parabolic is now below the most recent bar. So there's no indication to reverse this uptrend. Now, below here, we find Williams per centaur above the 50% line. We have MACD trending up, and we have RSI above the 50% line and approaching the 60% line. And we have Chaikin money flow turning positive. So, of course, I'm holding Berkshire. I've regained much of the paper loss that I had. And we can look at a daily chart. On the daily chart, we can see what happened here is that we actually went up and closed above the upper Bollinger Band a couple of times, 3 times. And so now we're consolidating back to what Alex would call consensus of value. And I believe that's a good term to use. So I'm expecting further move up from here. If we look down at the other indicators, oh, by the way, parabolic is still below the most recent bar. So there's no indication to reverse this uptrend. And Williams per centaur above 20%. MACD is looking pretty good. The RSI 12 is above the 60% line. And interestingly enough, you can see that the money is coming in. The Berkshire is being bought up. So I like it. I own it, and I'm holding it. And here's a weekly chart of Facebook. I did take some gains on Facebook, and I'm looking to buy it again. And here's what we see here now. We have the 9 above 30 and the 4 above the 9. So the trend is up. We did have a pullback. However, if you look at the Chaikin money flow, you can see that the buyers came in here on last week, and they were buying up the Facebook again. So I like that kind of price action. We have some contradictory indications here because we have parabolic above the most recent bar now. So there's a little bit of a tug of war going on between the bulls and bears. Most of the indicators, though, are still looking pretty good, pretty bullish. Williams per centaur above 20. MACD is pulling back on the weekly chart, but there's no divergence. There is one on the daily, but it's not as significant as when it's on the weekly chart, and we don't have that here. Now, RSI 12 is above the 60% line, and we saw what Chaikin is doing. So let's look at the daily chart. Interestingly enough, on the daily chart, we have one of those symmetrical triangles, and we know that this is a continuation pattern after an uptrend. So I'm looking to buy Facebook again, especially put a buy stop order just above here, just above where it's at now. So I'll be going back into Facebook. You can see how the money came in on Friday here. In fact, for the later part of the week, the money was coming into Facebook. So the smart money was buying when the weak hands were selling. So I like Facebook. And here's Apple, the weekly chart of Apple. We saw that we had this high here, and then we consolidated. Parabolic is now above the most recent bar, and we are closing between the 9 and the 30. We're going into a squeeze though, a Bollinger Band squeeze. So we're waiting to see now, will this squeeze here be resolved to the upside or the downside? I'm betting on the upside. I think that the selling is overdone here. We still have an uptrend with the 9 above the 30. The 4 is sitting right at the level of the 9 right now, but we still have an uptrend on that. And the fact that we are closing between the 9 and the 30 once again is indicating to me that this is a buy signal. We are likely to see an up move from this area. Let's take a look at the daily chart. On the daily chart, we see a big downswing here, parabolic above the most recent bars, but we are now pretty close. We are now closing below 2 standard deviations, this blue Bollinger Band, and so we are likely to see some support here around this 142 level. And I'm looking to get back here into Apple if and when it begins to trend up again. The rest of the indicators are looking pretty weak. Williams for Centaur is now below the 80% line. However, Williams for Centaur, when it drops back down below here, below that 20% line, often marks the end of a downtrend. We'll see if that holds true. Chaikin money flow, we had some weakness, but now there may have been some buying coming in here at the end of the week. Let's take a look at the next chart. Here's our weekly chart of Microsoft. Very similar to Facebook, I think. When we look at the daily, you'll see. It pulled back it's now between the two, it closed between the 4 EMA and the 9 EMA. The parabolic is above the most recent bar. So that is indicating a switch from uptrend to downtrend. MACD is now above the zero line. So the bulls seem to be somewhat in charge here, except for this weakness that we are seeing in the daily chart here. The Chaikin money flow is still pretty positive, and RSI 12 is above the 60% line. There are contradictory indications, just like we saw with Facebook, but let's look at the daily chart. See, on the daily chart, we also have one of those triangles, which is a continuation pattern when it occurs at the top of an uptrend. So this was overdone. This downtrend was overdone. And now we're seeing at the end of the week, the money coming into Microsoft. We're seeing the Chaikin money flow, smart money buying it here. So I'm going to be looking to buy it above this, the apex of this triangle, somewhere above 72, 71 or 70 and a fraction. Let's take a look at something else. We just have time to do one more stock, so let's take a look at Visa. And on the weekly chart, we could see, similar to Microsoft, this pullback here. Chart looks very similar. Let's take a look at the daily. We can see a triangle again. So many of these stocks that pull back seem to be looking to find a bottom here and may present good buying opportunities. That's all we have time for this week. I wish you a happy weekend and happy Father's Day, and we'll try to do this again next week.